Hello and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory in for Hashtag the Awards. It's Friday, July 29th. And this is Africa 54.
Violent demonstrations against the UN peacekeeping forces in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo rage on. We'll explain why. Residents in Ethiopia's Afar region say children are dying as drought and conflict create a humanitarian crisis. And a new VOA documentary provides a closer look at an immigrant from Burkina Faso who is living the American dream.
We begin in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, where violent demonstrations against the United Nations peacekeeping forces are still raging. 19 people, including 3 UN peacekeepers, have died in the violent clashes. VOA's Bondiho has more.
A UN base has been firebombed in Beni, in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. Complaints have triggered the demonstrations that the UN mission known as MONUSCO has failed to protect civilians against militia violence, which has raged for years. The United States has asked the government in the Democratic Republic of Congo to protect UN peacekeepers and their facilities amid protests in the country.
We call on the national and local authorities in the DRC to ensure the protection of MONUSCO sites and personnel, and for protesters to express their sentiments peacefully. We appreciate the government of the DRC's commitment to investigating these events and holding accountable those responsible.
Demonstrations began on Monday in Goma. They spread on Tuesday to Butembo, where a UN soldier and 2 UN police officers with the mission were shot and killed, according to the UN deputy spokesman Farhan Haq.
Violence against our peacekeeping mission is continuing to escalate. At the MONUSCO Butembo base today, violent attackers snatched weapons from Congolese police and fired upon our uniformed personnel. Sadly, 1 military peacekeeper and 2 UN police personnel were killed, and another was injured. We add our voice to the acting head of MONUSCO, Kassim Dieng, to condemn the killing of our colleagues and to express our deepest sympathy to their families and colleagues.
In both cities, UN peacekeeping troops were accused of retaliating with force as hundreds of protesters threw rocks and petrol bombs, vandalized and set fire to UN buildings. A faction of the youth wing of President Felix Tshisekedi's ruling Union for Democracy and Social Progress had earlier called for protests, demanding the immediate withdrawal of UN peacekeepers over what it described as ineffectiveness. MONUSCO took over from an earlier UN operation in the DRC in 2010 to protect civilians and to support the government's stabilization efforts. Clashes between Congolese army and M23 rebel groups have displaced thousands. MONUSCO had more than 12,000 troops and 1,600 police deployed as of November 2021, and it's been gradually withdrawing forces for years. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
While still there, the UN Refugee Agency says clashes this year between the DRC army and the rebel group M23 have displaced more than 160,000 people. Ruth Omar visited makeshift camps for the displaced north of Goma and has this report.
20-year-old Rebecca Nyirarukundo fled clashes in June between the Congolese army and the rebels around Ruchuru territory with a husband and 1-year-old son. They found shelter at this school-turned camp for the displaced in Nyiragongo territory, along with hundreds of others.
We arrived here on foot because we had no transportation, but had no food. I went 5 days without cooking, and my child became weak. I took him to the health center, but nothing worked.
Her son was malnourished, got sick, and on July 17, he died. In the town of Kanyaruchinya, those newly displaced keep arriving, stretching the few resources available.
Since we have been here, we have had no assistance. I have already buried 4 people because of the lack of water, food, and shelter. We are suffering a lot.
The UN Refugee Agency, or UNHCR, says clashes since March between the Congolese National Army and the rebel March 23 movement have forced more than 160,000 people to flee their homes. The UNHCR says it has received less than 1/5 of a $225 million budget request for the DRC that was based on needs before the fighting broke out. Medical aid is also stretched in Kanyaruchinya as the town has only one mobile hospital.
The hospital was installed in 2021 under the leadership of the president, but there has been no improvement in terms of equipment and logistics. The government has been giving almost nothing lately, and the crisis has caused problems with health care.
Meanwhile, protests this week against the UN peacekeeping mission in eastern Congo turned violent and left at least 15 people dead. The demonstrators accused the peacekeeping force of failing to stabilize the region and keep them safe. Whether or not one blames the peacekeepers for the situation, it is clear that safety in the towns near Goma is a scarce commodity. Ruth Omar Esther for VOA News, Nyiragongo Territory, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, for more perspective on the security situation in the DRC, Paul Ntuli, a research specialist with the Africa Center for Strategic Studies, joins me live via Skype from here in Washington. Paul, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Vincent. I'm glad to be back.
Thank you. Now, let's start with this week's violent demonstrations. What really is behind those? I mean, it's not the first time the UN peacekeeping forces in the DRC. What really led to what we've witnessed the last few days?
I think it's three things. One is the sudden eruption of the M23 rebellion. And this time that eruption is even more serious than other eruptions of violence that we've seen from this group. Mm-hmm. There had been a sense that the group was defeated by the Force Intervention Brigade in 2013, and now suddenly it's come back to life. That's the first element. And so I think it has shocked the population. Secondly, the sheer span, the scope of this rebellion. I mean, stretching all the way from the Ugandan border in Bunagana down the Rwandese border in Goma, has led to massive displacement of civilians and lots of civilian deaths. Yeah. So I think that is there's that sense that the UN forces and the foreign forces that are in the country have failed to provide security. And in the DRC, we've seen consistently that failure to protect civilians is a political issue, and it's also a social issue. Now, so I think these are the two issues.
Yeah, and those are the complaints we keep hearing from citizens. But Paul, you have personally actually been involved in the Congolese ceasefire negotiations. You were even at the inter-Congolese dialogue at Sun City in South Africa. Why have these conflicts, continued for, actually we can say, decades now? Why has there not been any meaningful ceasefire or even complete resolution?
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, this is, the UN, this is the longest serving UN mission. The UN has been involved in different ways and forms in a peacekeeping role since the 1960s, since Congolese independence, right? The country has faced these persistent security crises. And I think there are a number of reasons. One is just the sheer lack of government capacity, right, to pacify these different areas. I think it's important for the audience to remember that just the eastern parts of the Democratic Republic of Congo alone are larger than Western Europe. I mean, it's larger than Western Europe, okay? It's very, very difficult to stabilize. Secondly, you have over 70 armed groups, of which the M23 is simply one out of over 70 armed groups that are in the country. The third element is the lack of capacity of the Congolese military. I mean, it has always been a problem, namely that the Congolese security services are not able to, just from a logistical perspective. But at the same time, the Congolese military is not trusted by civilians simply because of human rights abuses, issues of corruption, and so on. So there's essentially a lack of capacity on that front.
So now, Paul, is it a hopeless situation here, or has there been any proposition that could be viable in resolving that situation?
Yes, I think we've had historical, I think the processes right now, there's the East African community that's trying to deploy a force in the area, and the region's political leaders are trying to trying to do something about that M23 violence. But I think they would benefit greatly from the Congolese, from recent history. I think inter-Congolese dialogue was one mechanism that was very, very effective in getting the different political sides together around a table to address the issues around the crisis in the Congo. And I think it was a successful process. Alongside that process, you had the Lusaka peace process, what you just mentioned before, which was a process that was dealing with the external element inside the DRC, whereby we were able to essentially negotiate ceasefire agreements among the countries that were involved in Congo. So I think there's lessons to learn internally and externally.
Well, this is a conversation that will continue. We really appreciate your insights, Paul. Paul Ntulie is a research specialist with the Africa Center for Strategic Studies here in Washington. And our licensing rights for 30 oil and gas blocks in the Democratic Republic of Congo went up for auction on Thursday, opening parts of the world's second biggest rainforest to drilling that could release large amounts of carbon into the atmosphere, jeopardizing climate goals to tame global warming. Attendees include a representative from the France's Total Energies, TFFE, and several domestic companies. President Felix Tshisekedi presided over the launch of bidding at a ceremony in Kinshasa. He said modern drilling methods and tight regulation will minimize the ecological impact, but he denied that Congo was going back on commitments to protect its forests.
I would like to reassure our partners of our determination to carry out exploration using the most modern technological means that protect the environment, the fauna and flora, preserve the ecosystem and the ecological balance. In a win-win partnership that respects environmental standards and the interests of local communities. With these words, I'm delighted to solemnly launch today's bidding process for 27 oil blocks and 3 gas blocks.
Now, environmental activists and scientists say drilling in the designated areas will inevitably have steep consequences. Several of the proposed oil blocks overlap with peatlands in swampy areas that hold billions of tons of carbon. Into East Africa now, in Ethiopia's Afar region, 8 trucks pass through bound for Tigray from Djibouti. But people who live by the side of the road say they have nothing to eat and their children are dying. Henry Wilkins talks to those caught between drought and the impact of the conflict in the town of Erbeti, and 8 workers who say the Afar regional administration should declare drought as a crisis to get needed assistance.
Living by the side of the road on the edge of the town of Erbeti, Aisha Mohammed says members of her family have died of hunger.
There is not enough food and drink, and we do not have enough clothes, blankets. We expect God first, and then the government to help us.
Aisha is one of more than 5 million people in Ethiopia displaced by the conflict, struggling to hold their lives together. 8 trucks pass along the road where she lives, travelling from the neighbouring Djibouti to Ethiopia's Tigray region. The Famine Early Warning System Network, a US agency tracking food insecurity, says Tigray could be in a state of famine. A humanitarian blockade to Tigray means access for food aid is restricted, while a fuel restriction on the region makes it difficult to distribute food to remote areas. Many Afar residents that spoke with VOA expressed dissatisfaction, saying they were not receiving enough aid, while Tigray, which the Afar administration is at war with, is.
Humanitarian aid goes to our enemies, and we look at it as a sad thing. They haven't been given any aid for a whole month. We notice the aid goes to Tigray while we are hungry.
These are the graves of people who lived in the makeshift camp in Erbeti. The smallest grave belongs to a child less than a year old. Residents say some of them died of starvation. VOA was unable to independently verify the accounts. A non-profit in Afar says difficulties associated with the recovery from the conflict with Tigray and a historic drought are combining to create a deadly crisis for the region.
From the humanitarian position, we would really implore them to declare a drought, because, I mean, what we're doing is very little for the community and very insignificant compared to the need. So we're having to go into a community and choose those who may die in the next 2 to 3 weeks and then leave the rest to go down the hill.
The Afar Regional Administration did not respond to a request for comment on its decision not to declare a drought. The UN's World Food Programme told VOA via email WFP delivers food assistance to 650,000 people in Afar. This is as per our mandate requested by the government. We deliver in Erebti. We do not deliver in locations or to people who the government doesn't request our support for. A report by the Emergency Nutrition Coordination Unit in Afar says 1.3 million people are in need of food aid, however. In a July 26 report, the state-funded Ethiopian Human Rights Commission called for an intervention in regions affected by the drought and blamed lack of early warning for much of the devastation. The report did not cover the Afar region, however. It focused on the southern part of the country.
Once again, this drought comes on top of the fact that there are already a number of displaced persons and refugees in the Somali region, and that's so it's a heavy burden on the region, but also nationwide. And yeah, we certainly hope that the report will mobilize further attention to it and further action.
Aisha says the situation for her and her family remains desperate. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Erebti, Ethiopia.
AIDS 2022, the 24th International AIDS Conference, is underway in Montreal, Canada. It's bringing together thousands of experts, practitioners and advocates as it continues the effort to educate people about AIDS, as well as keep the pressure on governments to address it. The global conference on AIDS, convened by the International AIDS Society, is meant to unite scientists, policymakers, and activists to galvanize the scientific response, build global solidarity, and enhance human dignity for all those living with and affected by HIV. The conference runs until August the 2nd. Well, we are excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. Still to come, in our entertainment report, an African immigrant living the American dream. Stay with us.
Africa is a continent blessed with a wealth of assets, from human capital to vital minerals to agricultural and water resources, just to name but a few. However, an estimate of 600 million Africans are without access to electricity, a basic necessity of life. On this week's Our Voices, we are taking an in-depth look at how countries on the continent are utilizing their resources, particularly solar energy, to power their nations. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
Well, in other African news, at least 2 people killed and 8 others injured in southwestern Somalia Friday in a bomb blast that targeted a regional minister in Baidoa. France has filed charges against 5 more children of former Gabon President Omar Bongo of allegedly ill-gotten Gabonese assets in the European country. And Algeria, Nigeria, and Niger signed a memorandum of understanding to build a natural gas pipeline across the Sahara Desert. Now, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov says he expects to soon have a phone conversation with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken to discuss the potential prisoner exchange to return to America former U.S. Marine Paul Whelan and basketball star Brittany Griner, who has been detained in Moscow since February. Lavrov says the Russian Foreign Ministry does not usually handle such issues, but says he will listen to what Secretary Blinken has to say. Lavrov spoke about the phone call process.
We first found about it in Africa when the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken went on TV and stated he was going to contact me on the phone. About a day passed before he got an official request. We are currently coordinating the time of this contact. It should take place when I'm in my work office. Clearly, it can hardly happen today. But in the coming days, we will offer a convenient date to our American colleagues.
Whelan was arrested in Russia in December 2018 and accused of spying. In June 2020, he received a 16-year prison sentence with the possibility of time in labor camp. Greiner was arrested at an airport near Moscow after customs officials found 2 cannabis vapor cartridges in her bag. Well, the American dream is the main reason why for centuries the United States has been the #1 destination for generations of immigrants. For some who eventually settle in the country, the dream can become a reality. Viewers Azuma Compaore looks at Adisa Barry, an immigrant from Burkina Faso who transformed her life in America.
According to a 2021 article published in Kiplinger.com, the state of Maryland had the 2nd highest number of millionaires in the United States of America in 2020. This is where we meet Adisa Barry, a decorated minority and woman business owner who came to America more than 30 years ago from Burkina Faso. Today, this self-made millionaire leads a successful electrical construction company with an annual revenue averaging $25 million.
When I came to this country, my major was accounting. I got my bachelor in accounting, and then I had a part-time job with a construction company. And I worked for the construction company as a controller of the company for about 12 years. Noticed that many CPAs are not familiar with construction accounting. And it's something that I had already understood very well in school, and I mastered it very well. So when we used to have CPA come in, I had to explain them about the construction accounting. And then I opened my own business, and I was doing construction accounting. Then when my business partner joined the business, he said, Adisa, I know you want to do construction management, but my background is electrical. If you want, we can take that route of the electrical. I said, hey, any opportunity that can grow the business, let's go for it. And that's how we got ourselves into electrical business. Yes.
In order to claim her place in this male-dominated industry, Adisa spared no efforts, even if that meant going outside of her skill set.
I'm a women-owned business. I'm a minority too. So when you go to apply those kind of certification, they want to make sure that you at least have a good knowledge about the business. So how do you get it? You have to educate yourself. I was going to evening classes, cutting all this wiring, doing receptacle, taking those electrical courses. I don't have to be on the job site, but I still have to do it. When I was in Burkina Faso, my teacher, he's like, you know what, let me tell you one thing. The definition of a businessman is somebody who takes a risk. The risk can be positive, and the risk can be negative. And he or she is mentally prepared for whatever the outcome of that risk is going to be.
Tell the stories on you today.
I never thought about being rich, but the first risk, opening my business, that's the first risk I took.
Well, now for more about his documentary on African millionaires in America, Azuma Compaore joins me here in studio. Welcome, Azuma.
Thanks for having me, Vincent.
Yeah, such an amazing job. First, just give us a sense of, how many other people you've spoken to in the documentary and how you came up with this idea anyway.
I initially, I think I had about 7 potential, candidates to be in the documentary, and somehow, you know, only 3 of them remained in the final piece. And all 3 of them have actually incredible stories. So to answer your question, you know, I was reading this report and I found that, you know, the average immigrant household in America in 2019 was about 60,000 compared to 50,000 for everybody else in America, which was very surprising to me. I'm like, okay, how many of them are actually really successful, making it big time and achieving the American dream? So everything really started there. I started to research a little bit more, and that's how I found myself drawn into, okay, I want to find who are the African Warren Buffetts.
Mm-hmm. So in this documentary, does it, you know, this lady, for example, says, of course, she had to take risks. Do all of them kind of paint the same picture? They took the first risk is to come to the U.S.
That's the first risk. Actually, you're right. Yeah. All of them, they actually have, you know, this unshakable desire to come to America and to make it to America. So Adisa, she had to, you know, to go through the different struggles. You have Dr. Akindele Kolade, who is also a very, you know, celebrity psychiatrist, actually, who faced a lot of challenges himself, you know, but he had to, you know, overcome, you know, I'm not going to give it away. Yeah. You guys have to go watch it, but he had to overcome a lot. And the last one, he's Douglas Eze, who also, you know, had to sleep in his car, for example, for a certain time before making it now.
One important thing, especially for our viewers in Africa to understand is, is it that American dream something you just come and pluck from somewhere and just...
Absolutely not. Leave? Absolutely not. All these guys, they really had to pay the dues. They really fought hard and they made a lot of sacrifices. You know, one thing I want to give to you is that, you know, when I was sharing the final movie with them, you know, some of them shed tears, you know. And what it really told me is that, you know, seeing your story being told, and you know, it just exudes the amount of effort and the sacrifice that you have to do. And this also talks about a lot of African immigrants here when they come. They see themselves in those 3 stories because they have to pay the dues. They have to face a lot of sacrifices, hoping one day they can make it big time.
It doesn't, it may not happen to everybody, but it's never easy. It's hard work. It is a lot of sacrifice.
Absolutely.
We really thank you. I appreciate very much what you've done, and congratulations for putting together such a captivating documentary. Zuma Compaore is a VOA Africa Division Executive Producer for television. Well, and that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a great weekend.